Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of MMA Vision Analysis. This one, I'm here to talk about UFC 305's main event. The one that took place in the middleweight division for the middleweight belt between current middleweight champion and still Dricus against the last stylebender Israel Adesanya. But before getting started, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification to get all of this that is new from this channel, your channel, the one and only MMA Vision Analysis. UFC 305, Perth, Australia, August 17th, will go down in history as one of the nights that truly shocked the world of mixed martial arts, I believe, for the lovers of stylebender specifically. When you watch a Dricus fight, especially prior to the Adesanya fight, you'll come to find that the guy has an extremely awkward style. His stance, the way he loops and throws punches, and even his takedowns are extremely unorthodox. My personal opinion, I don't think that's only my personal opinion, but that's the obvious thing that's been talked about at this point by many. Dricus against Sean Strickland was, I don't want to say picture perfect, but it was very consistent in terms of performance, very similar to the night of UFC 305. I believe what ultimately won the fight for Dricus against Sean Strickland was obviously, had very good striking against Strickland, but ultimately his takedowns was what won him the fight. I believe after last night, Dricus earned the respect of many. I believe even though the style is awkward and he's been the champion before the night of UFC 305, but defeating stylebender adds that much more to your name as Dricus. Now, after UFC 305, I believe that Dricus has gained many, many more fans, and I believe many, many more people are tuned in and will be tuned in after the night of UFC 305. Like I said, because defeating a guy like Adesanya is something that's going to be just as memorable as winning that middleweight title, I believe, for Dricus heading into the future, looking back at his career in retrospect. That being said, I spoke about this fight a lot leading up to the night of UFC 305. I talked about Adesanya gaining weight, muscle mass. I also talked about the possible hindrances that can create for Adesanya, specifically movement and technique. I want to touch on that first. I believe that Adesanya looked a bit bigger than what we're used to. I believe there was a bit more definition to Adesanya's torso specifically. I believe that ultimately hindered his movement. I don't think that last night's movement in terms of Adesanya was the peak. There was far from it. He did control center of the octagon for a majority of the time, where it was very evenly matched, but it was definitely not the case. Let's say it was not the same as the Strickland fight. Strickland fight, Adesanya was on the back foot for the entirety of the fight. I believe gaining muscle mass helped Adesanya kind of stay center of the octagon for the majority of the fight against Dricus. At the same time, I believe the added weight hindered Adesanya's movement. I believe it also took away a bit of his technique. Initially, yes, Adesanya was quicker to the punch. He was evading punches. But ultimately, as the fight graduated, and what Dricus started to do was he started to implement takedowns as the fight graduated. And when he shoots, it's just as unorthodox as its style standing up. His style with takedowns is very unorthodox as well. Very, very unorthodox. In all honesty, Adesanya had little answer for Dricus' takedown attempts. Initially, he was able to stuff some. He was able to get up after some takedowns. But ultimately, obviously, that's how the fight ended, via rear naked choke. I also touched on this point specifically leading up to the fight. I said if Dricus has an opportunity of winning this fight, it is going to be on the ground. And that was exactly what happened. Took Adesanya down to the ground. And, rear naked choke submission wins the fight for Dricus. This was a bit reminiscent of Adesanya's light heavyweight attempt, the Blachowicz fight. If we can all recall, it was very similar. In all honesty, not as anticlimactic as the light heavyweight fight, but this one actually had some action. This is not to say that Dricus had no answers for Adesanya's striking. That was not the case. Matter of fact, these guys were so evenly matched standing up, but on the ground, Dricus had the upper hand all day. Matter of fact, you could see the vulnerability of Adesanya when the fight went to the ground. And really, nothing has changed. Not much has changed in terms of Adesanya's ground game. Yes, his takedown defense at times is pretty good. But ultimately, when a guy keeps shooting for takedowns, it will pay dividends at some point, depending on how good the wrestler is, obviously. In this case, Dricus was definitely the better opponent on that night. Initially, this fight did seem as if it was on Adesanya's side. Let's say leading up to the third, fourth round, Adesanya was able to establish some sort of hold on the fight. Body shots seemed like they were taking a toll on Dricus. You can kind of see that he was sort of getting labored. But that was a part of his awkward style. He's just very hard to read. The way that he throws punches are extremely unorthodox. The way that he shoots for takedowns is extremely unorthodox as well. And when the guy seems like he's tired, he's not. It's just the style is very, very difficult to read. I believe Adesanya found that out the hard way. Like I said, Adesanya was not completely outclassed in that of UFC 305, but Dricus was most certainly the better fighter on that night. Not so much striking. I believe they were pretty even. Adesanya was able to land some pretty good shots, a lot of body work. I think that ultimately that's what they were trying to do, is to fatigue the body, which ultimately was paying dividends at some point. But with Dricus, just when you think the guy is finished, he goes and shoots for a takedown, and he's so relentless with his takedown attempts. Ultimately won him the fight. He did attempt a rear naked choke, I believe, in the fourth round, I want to say, but ultimately won the fight via rear naked choke with his last takedown. I have so many thoughts and so many things that I want to say about Dricus and Adesanya moving forward after this fight. But ultimately, this was kind of predictable. If Dricus was to win this fight, he's going to be on the ground. I actually talked about this leading up to the fight. And I also mentioned that the momentum is with Dricus, obviously. There was a lot of going back and forth between the two. But that was not as exciting as people wanted to make it seem. There was nothing there, in all honesty. And I still think that there was no animosity between the two. These guys have nothing but respect for one another. In all honesty, a 35-year-old Israel Adesanya, with his last performance against Dricus, is not looking like peak Adesanya that we knew from 2 or 3 years ago. I don't want to say that the tides are turning. Obviously, fighters can always catch a second win and come back to reclaim their, glory days. Just look at Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker is literally a fight or two away from a title fight. So Hamzat Chimaev, after that, maybe if he gets through Chimaev, he's fighting for a title. So this is not to count Adesanya out, but last night's performance was definitely not one of Adesanya's better performances. This is back-to-back bad performances for Adesanya. I don't want to say that this is the end of Izzy. That's not the case. I don't think that's the case. But I do think that, obviously, at this point, Adesanya is going to have to climb his way back up to the top. And what does that road look like? Who knows? He did mention something about this, after the fight. But in all honesty, it's very interesting what happens for Izzy after this. I mean, the guy could retire right now, and I think everybody would be okay with it. Legacy is already established, cemented, one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time. Last night's defeat takes nothing away from Izzy, in all honesty. And whether he does or doesn't fight anymore, I don't think that really does anything to tarnish his already established legacy. Also, I would like to add that Dricus deserved and earned his respect. I mean, obviously, he was the champion even prior to entering the octagon last night, the night of the UFC 305. But at the same time, I think defeating a guy like Israel Adesanya means just as much as winning that title, in all honesty. I really do believe in that. And the win is big. With the win, I believe Dricus has earned the respect and admiration of many fans after the night of UFC 305, the one that took place in Perth, Australia, August 17th. If you made it this far, I appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments and like, subscribe for more.